Today our guest is Robin Wilt, who is the Democratic candidate for State Senate in the 56th District. Now, Robin, you may be wondering why I asked you about ergonomic design features before we went to the break. As it happens, New York State has what's called an assault weapons ban. And in order for a weapon to qualify as an assault weapon, it has to have a certain number of basically 3 characteristics. And they can be various characteristics, it just has a total of 3. One of them being a pistol grip. Now a pistol grip is when you have a gun and it has a handle where you can grip like a pistol versus whereas a rifle where you have to hold it back here. Okay. And so the pistol grip is an ergonomic design feature which eliminates repetitive stress injuries for target shooters and hunters. So do you believe that one of the factors for making a weapon illegal in New York State should be the possession of this ergonomic design feature called a pistol grip?
Well, I don't think it's the ergonomics that are a factor here. Obviously, it is what the weapons have been used for, the fact that they've been associated with violent crime in the state. You know, I actually am in favor of micro-stamping of firearms. I'm in favor of gun control measures. As I think you're aware, we have a very high rate of gun violence in the city of Rochester. And I think that we need to give law enforcement the tools to keep our citizens safe.
Okay. Now, do you believe in general that people have the right to defend themselves from attackers?
Absolutely.
Do they have a right to use weapons such as pepper spray or mace to defend themselves from attackers?
You know, the use of many of these substances are regulated, and you know, they're regulated by municipality in some cases and by other jurisdictions in others. I think that the government entities that create those laws make them for a reason.
Okay. Let's move on here. Do you believe that the war on drugs has been effective?
No, I don't think it's been effective.
Okay. Unless
we're talking about incarcerating a lot of people, in terms of that has been extremely effective.
Okay. So would you support or oppose legislation to end the prohibition of marijuana for adults?
I would support legislation to end the prohibition of marijuana for adults.
Okay. Would you support legislation to repeal the prohibition on other recreational drugs?
I would have to look at that more carefully on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, I'd have to examine that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Would you support expanding the definition of burglary to include federal employees who enter a building without permission using sneak and peek warrants under the Patriot Act?
I'm no fan of the Patriot Act. I think, like the majority of the population, it's bad legislation. It does undermine people's individual freedoms. I think that we should repeal the Patriot Act. I don't know that adding additional legislation to incarcerate government officials in the execution of their duties is necessarily the most effective way to go here.
Okay. Let's see. Senator Joe Robach introduced a bill to split New York into 2 states, upstate and downstate. Would you support or oppose this bill?
I would oppose the bill.
Okay. As long as we're on civil liberties, what about the Real ID Act? Do you think that New York, you know, under Governor Spitzer, was basically the first state to comply with the Federal Real ID Act? Do you think that New York should join or rejoin those states which are currently saying, no way, we're not going to do this?
Is that even up for discussion right now? As far as I knew, that the issue was put to bed. Governor Spitzer was an advocate, but I don't know that it had any advocacy within the legislative body. So it's a very complex issue. The way that you frame the question is not necessarily the way I would look at it. You know, I don't think that anybody would disagree that we do need to get a handle on immigration to this country, and that our immigration policy is not necessarily effective. I don't think that we should take anything off the table in terms that might help us address the issue of immigration to this country.
Okay. Let's see. Do you believe in the separation of church and state?
I do believe in the separation of church and state.
So would you support legislation to remove references such as "In God We Trust" from the dollar bill? Going back to an issue that was raised last year.
Right.
How far should it go? Let me be more general.
Obviously, our Constitution provides for freedom of religion, separation of church and state. I don't think that we, you know, what we put on our coins is necessarily indicative of,
We're almost out of time.
Sorry.
But I guess you're saying that's not a big issue for you.
It's not. It's really not a big issue.
Okay. We will be back, and keep watching.
My Twitter handle, introductory number 453. Any person desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
Are there any speakers? Seeing none, the hearing is closed.
Pursuant to the law, public hearing will now be had on the following matter. 454. Any person desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
Are there any speakers? Seeing none, this hearing is closed.
Pursuant to the law, public hearing will now be had on the following matter. Approving changes in the payment. Any persons desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
Are there any speakers? Seeing none, the hearing is closed.